This is Justin.
And this is Haley. You're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize the conversations around money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
The do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom. Hi Toasties, welcome to The Price of Avocado Toast.
Whether you're a first-time listener or you've been following us from the start of this thing, we're so glad to have this conversation with you today. All right, you guys, so today we have an interview scheduled with the Everyday Millennial, Chris. We got to sit down and chat with him a couple weeks ago. It's an awesome interview. We can't wait to share it with you. But before we do, we've just got a few bits of business that we need to get to. So I get to share a massive shout out to Debt Free Colorado, who is very clearly a Hamill fan and absolutely knew the song that I was talking about in last week's episode. And then I also want to give a shout out to our friend Shannon, who texted me like right afterwards too and was like, I know what song it is. So shout out you both. Shout out Hamilton. You guys listen to the Hamilton soundtrack. It is an amazing piece of art.
Justin is obsessed, and it was from The Room Where It Happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a very, very catchy tune. I don't know if you want it stuck in your brain, but that's where that came from. All right, we're going to switch gears here. Please make sure that you are following us on Instagram. We are at The Price of Avocado Toast on Instagram. And this month, for the month of February, we are doing a no-spend challenge, but with a slight difference in it's not really like no spending at all. It's just no spending for anything that's outside of pre-budgeted items. So we have a no-spend challenge tracker that was made by Hopefully Frugal. So thank you, Hopefully Frugal, for making that for us. And you can find that on our Instagram page under the highlights. Another reason you want to be following us is that we are about to hit 10,000 downloads for this podcast, which is super freaking cool. Once we hit 10,000 downloads this week, we will be launching a giveaway. So make sure you're following us so you can be tuned in when we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to get your extra shot at that giveaway.
For some cash money.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you guys. So that's the only business we have for you. So let's go ahead and dive into our interview with Chris, the Everyday Millennial. What's going on, you guys? We're sitting down today with Chris, a.k.a. the Everyday Millennial from Instagram. Chris, thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate you coming on. I know that Haley's been interacting with you quite a bit, and I'm super hyped because you're like one of the first dudes we've interviewed. So I feel like personally invested right now. This is great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us kind of who you are, how the Everyday Millennial got started, what it looks like for you, or what your kind of hopes with it are.
Yeah, so like I said, my name is Chris. I'm in my early 30s, and I'm really just working towards financial freedom right now. I kind of realized that even though I studied finance in school, they didn't really teach me anything about personal finance. And when it came to money, I wasn't really that good at money. I had student loan debt, and at 26, my parents were like, "Are you gonna pay us back this $50,000 that you owe us? Because we're gonna need it back." And I was like, "Wait, like I actually have to pay this back to you?" And so, after kind of coming to that realization, I realized I need to start figuring out my money. And luckily, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, but I realized that with the student loan kind of hanging over my head, it's like, what can I do to really figure out a way to pay this off as quick as possible? And that's kind of when I looked up Mr. Money Mustache and checked out his platform, and he really kind of helped me change the mindset for money, and that you didn't necessarily need to think just in this box. You can really think outside of the box and be creative to reduce your expenses. The Everyday Millennial platform is really just a platform that I kind of created because a lot of my friends were asking me about money and just about how can I pay off my debt, my student loans, and what can I do to generate additional income? And so as a result of that, I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to just create the social media platform. I didn't really know what I was doing. Just I'm sure many people who create social media platforms are like, I have no idea how to create a post. I have no idea how to create a story, but
yeah.
It's really been an awesome journey within the last year.
That's awesome.
That's super cool. In your everyday life, without going into too much detail, do you work in finance in your everyday life, or is this just like a subsection of your
Yeah,
world?
so I like studied finance, and I just decided, when I graduated, I didn't want to do Wall Street, and so I like moved down to the Washington D.C. area, and I found a like data analysis job, and kind of in like consulting, and so like my day-to-day job is really just like data analysis, like building dashboards and like things like that. But I like was always good around numbers, and that's kind of where my like passion lies. And so I like realized, well, hey, if I'm good around numbers and Excel and like things like that, like maybe I should think about like how I can grow my net worth, and a bunch of like investing and wealth tools. And so that's kind of like really my like everyday life.
Love it. I did a little research on your page just to kind of dig into some information, and I saw that you had your student loans. How long did it take you to pay those off?
So it was a little bit more than 2 years.
That's really good.
Honestly, yeah, it was actually like I was super happy with it. It was just one of those things where it took a while to get going, I guess, because when you're looking at $50,000 as a 26-year-old, you're thinking this is gonna take forever. And I think that I was just focused on saving. But once I paid off the first 10,000, I think it was so much easier because I was already buying in. I was already realizing, what, this has worked for me. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I was obviously calculating like how fast I was saving, and my savings rate and things like that. And I think that's really kind of where my like financial journey really changed.
Did you ever have any other debts like credit card debt or personal loans, car loans, any of that jazz?
So no, as far as like debt, I was pretty lucky. My parents really, they didn't teach me much about money, but they told me that to just make sure you save, and if you're gonna have a credit card, you have to pay it off in full. And so like luckily, I didn't get to a point where I was buying things that I like couldn't afford, but I just wasn't financially educated. I didn't really know like why I wouldn't necessarily want to like pay off my credit cards in full. I had to ask them one time, so in order to build up your credit, don't you not want to pay off your credit card in full? And my parents were like, I don't have a great explanation, but you need to pay it off in full. And so that was like to the extent of my like background with like money.
I like that. That's interesting because we've had a kind of like a mix of people that
Yeah.
have come on the podcast, and they're
All
like different backgrounds and stuff. But that's one of those times where it's such a parent thing to be like, I don't really have
I don't have
a
an
good
answer.
explanation, but like just trust in what I'm saying. That's awesome.
Yeah, and also my parents, like being first generation like immigrants, like they didn't really know anything about investing either. They were just told, save your money, like save it just in case for emergencies and things like that. And so kind of like growing up, it was, all right, Chris, just focus on saving your money. And then what happens when you finally do get a little bit of money, all you want to do is spend it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then so pretty much from my early 20s until I was 26, it was, let's go out, let's live it up, let's do like fun things. And then I literally remember like one moment where I think I got a bonus or just like an extra lump sum of money, and I'm like, where do we go to spend this money? And I think that once I kind of shifted my mindset towards more of a investing and growth mindset, then my kind of like ideology of like what money is kind of like changed. So
That lifestyle inflation, avoiding it is so hard. And especially if you get a raise or a bonus or anything exciting like that, like you want to reward yourself and go do all these things, and it's really hard not to. Or to figure out like what is the balance here? What is this acceptable,
Mhm.
and what is like, okay, was way too much.
Definitely.
I absolutely agree with that, because I think it's also even harder like nowadays for kids, because being in social media, right? And my youngest brother, he's like 20 years old, and so he's in the thick of college. There's so much societal pressures to also like keep up, right? If you want to be like the popular one, you have to likely have the latest and greatest, toys and like apartments and cars and like things like that. And I think that when you're that age, you don't really know what's right and what's wrong necessarily. You're just saying, this is what everyone else does. This is what everyone else has. This is what I need, right? And I think it's just really tough growing up nowadays, because of all of these different societal pressures.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
so true.
everywhere, and it's so quick. Like, I mean, you can access the pressure, with a click of a couple buttons, for sure. Okay, so I want to ask, how long have you been running the Everyday Millennial page, and what is your slant with it? For example, obviously ours is simply podcast driven. Some people really lean into the TikTok and Reels aspect of social media. What would you say is your slant for Everyday Millennial?
So I think that's actually a great question, but I think that the kind of goal is to ultimately provide either a community, right, where whether it's through Facebook or through Instagram or a different platform where I can kind of help other people with their questions. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do coaching or if I want to provide resources or more of a course and things like that. But right now, I'm just enjoying providing free tools. For my expense tracker, it was just one of those things where I thought Excel and this type of stuff would be easy for everybody. But I realized after speaking with a few people that it's not, and just being able to provide a free tool for other people, so that way they can start tracking their money. It's really kind of eye opening, and it actually makes me really happy whenever someone just says, "Hey, I've been trying to build this for the last 6 months, and you just provided me this tool." And luckily I've had over 600 downloads, and it's actually incredible. And I'm just happy that I can give this out for free. Hopefully in the future, I'll have additional resources to kind of bridge that gap between financial literacy. Because I do think that, whether it's a podcast or, a tool, a resource, a website, that my goal is to just make this available for everybody. I care about just building awareness, because when I kind of think about kind of why I started this platform, and I started it January 19th, 2020, and because I remember that first post, and I'm live, and I was telling my wife and my sister-in-law, make sure to go on my page and follow me and like me, because I'm gonna have 0 likes. But you kind of remember where you came from,
Yeah.
and I think that in the future, right, just being able to provide these resources to help other people is just going to be huge. Because for somebody like my brother who's 20 years old, he probably doesn't have to worry about the 401k, the Roth IRA yet, right? He's still kind of in the college mode. He's probably just worried about getting a job. But I think it's so important for people his age actually to be paying attention to this, because it's all about building awareness. You don't need to do this stuff right now, but you need to know that this information exists,
Yeah.
that these tools exist, that this mindset can exist. And so maybe, when you are, 24 and you're like, hey, you know what? I want to dive deep into my finances. That these resources exist out there, and you know exactly where to go.
I love that. My favorite part about the debt-free community is really there is so much information coming from so many different people who come from different backgrounds and live in different places. And we recently made the shift to stop listening to Dave Ramsey and just taking in Dave Ramsey, and now we're taking in information from so many different sources and people, and I feel like I know so much more just from being able to take in from different people. We hadn't even dove into investing at all. We're still barely, we really just know about Roth IRAs, and that's about it. But you can go online and find anything from people, and it's free. Most of it is free.
That's what I think is most interesting too, is a large portion of the debt-free community or the financial literacy community has these really great altruistic motives behind it, where it's
Yes.
like,
To
I
help
want
people.
other people to be successful. I want other people to better their own situation, their
Yeah.
family situation. And so you've got, a wealth of resources that range from free to a slight cost. And the return of investment is so often such a massive gain that it's worth it. It's really cool. It's a really cool part about being in the community itself.
Yeah, and one thing I definitely like to add is I didn't create this platform to become a millionaire. I will tell you that right now. Okay, with the number of hours that I spent, like creating posts and thinking about content, like and responding to like DMs and posting and everything that comes along with it. I'm not starting this platform so I can necessarily like benefit from it. Like I think I've made like a little bit of money through like digital products and like things like that, but that's not the goal of this platform. This platform is so when somebody messages me and says, hey, like I have a finance question, I am not sure, do I invest, do I save, like, how do I talk to my spouse about money? Just being available
Yeah.
to somebody who has this question and having them say thank you, like that is so helpful. That really is worth it for me, because I know that I'm making a little bit of a difference.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
You totally are. And
Yeah,
like
1,000%.
like I said before we actually pressed play to record, you're planting seeds. No matter what, even if it's just one person that reads your post, or for us in our situation, if it's only one or two people listening to the podcast, they can take what they want from it and it plants a seed, and then they can think about it and explore on their own time. But you're doing that, and that is definitely making a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I was looking through your Instagram, and it seems like your favorite way to make additional money is investing. And we've said, like, that's not totally where we're at yet because we have such large student loan debt that we're still trying to get out of. What would you say is, like, a good place for people to start investing? Or if somebody was, like, going to come to your page, what would you say is, like, the number one thing that they need to look at first?
So the first thing I would say is if you have an employer match, you should definitely take advantage of that because that's 100% guaranteed free money for you, right? So even if you have student loans or even if you have like high credit card debt, like you should definitely at least invest the match. After that, I would just open up a Roth IRA and put whatever money you have in there. But again, if you have high interest rate debt where it's like greater than 7%, I would recommend just focusing all of your money and not thinking about investing because, one thing that I think that people get overwhelmed with in personal finance is there's just so many things that they want to do, right? They're like, I want to buy this, I want to invest, I want to pay off student loans, I have like credit card debt too. It's like sometimes it's just best to just focus on one thing, right? And so if you want to dabble in investing, I think it's okay, but just make sure that like 90% of my extra money is going to go towards my student loans, but I would focus on the employer match and I would focus on investing in your Roth IRA. So like those are kind of like the two main things that I would start with.
So you said something kind of interesting there, talking about if somebody has debt that's, over that 7% interest rate, that you think, attacking that first to get rid of that is important. What gives you that number of the 7%? Because I'm thinking in my mind, like, okay, cool, over 7%, you're probably looking at like high credit cards, maybe some type of, bad car payment that you got stuck in, maybe like a payday lender of some kind. So is it just because we typically see over 7%, that threshold being more predatory, or what clues that in for you?
Well, so there's this common notion where like investing in the market, especially in index funds, will return at least 7% year over year. And so if you end up paying off this debt that's greater than 7%, that's like a guaranteed rate of return on that money, right? And so as a result of that, I think it's a lot smarter to focus on any debt that you have that's greater than 7% rather than investing in the market. And then once you've eliminated that, I know people with a lower interest for your student loans. And so for the student loans, if it's like really, really low, like I'm not sure like what the average percentage, but if it's really low, it may make sense to invest in the market because you're gonna likely increase your net worth. And so for anyone who asks me, should I pay off my student loans or should I invest? I typically say if you want to get investing, just split it right down the middle, 50-50, right? Go and get in the investing game, start building up your portfolio, and then commit to putting 50% of it into your like student loans. I know like this is like a huge topic that I've been asked is, should I kind of wait for student loan forgiveness? Like should I, this new administration is like coming in. I don't want to pay off my student loans and then have them like forgiven and I could have invested. And so just in general, I typically err on the side of I'm not going to rely on anyone else when it comes to my money. I'm gonna control what I can control, and if I can control my student loans and I can pay them off, then I'm gonna focus on like doing that. Of course, there's always a chance that they do get forgiven, but that's a big if, right? And and then you're also kind of waiting in this like waiting game where you're not sure whether or not you want to pay off the student loans because you're like waiting for them to be forgiven. For me, it was let's turn this page on this student loan debt. Let's be essentially debt free, accept the mortgage, and let's go ahead now and focus 100% on building wealth.
I like that. I've had this other question that's kind of tossed around in my mind along the lines of like student loans and investing, and maybe being somebody who's a little bit more comfortable with investing than me, you can kind of talk me through this and see if I'm totally off base or not. I don't know if this is stupid, but like I don't know if I like saw this on an Instagram and it like triggered a thought or what, but do you know or have you heard of people who like instead of paying off their student loans try and like I don't use the word game, but they try and like game the stock market in maybe penny stocks or something and then try and make money, get out and throw that money at student loans after they've made some? Is that something you've heard of, or is that just like something I've made up in my mind from too much Wolf of Wall Street?
I think, in all honesty, I think that there are people, right? Like you're always going to have the success stories.
Mm-hmm.
But what people don't realize is that for every success story, there's probably 5 people who have lost money, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about those, you're going to hear the stories of the people who put all of their money in Bitcoin like 10 years ago. And then now it's, $300,000 and they somehow didn't sell either. And then they paid off their like student loans, right? This is just one of those things where I think, if you know in retrospect that that the stock market is gonna crash down to the bottom on March 26th, and you put all of your money in there, and you know that it is gonna be coming and roaring back, then of course in hindsight you're gonna say, I could have made 100% on my money. Like, why didn't I like do that, right? But most people just you can't predict the future. If we could predict the future, we would have put 100% of our assets into the stock market because we knew it was going to come like roaring back, right? And so these are just one of those things where you hear the success stories, and I believe them, but there are so many stories where people also lose like a lot of money. And I was just talking to a few people yesterday about it, where people have asked me, so Chris, like I want to purchase a house in the next year. Should I, and I have, let's say $50,000, should I like invest it, right? Because I think the stock market is going to go up. And I tell them, so you have $50,000 and you're going to invest this. And so if it goes to 75,000, that's fantastic, right? You just made some money. But what if it went down to 25,000? You'd be pretty upset that you're like, I've saved $50,000 for this house, and all of a sudden it just decreased by 50% because of me trying to invest it, right? And so it's just one of those things where you have to just trust yourself and say, hey, listen, if I'm using this for the short term, I shouldn't be willing to risk it. If it's for the long term, then like go ahead and invest it.
It's almost like that saying, time in the market is better than timing the market. That makes sense.
Timing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I have to throw this out there. I just love that we're bringing people on the podcast to talk about things from different perspectives, because I had never considered the 7% thing. I'd never even heard of that. So it's just a whole different way of doing things. You know, we've been saying on our podcast and on our Instagram lately, there's no one size fits all budgeting method. There's no one size fits all way to do finances in general. So whatever works for you and your situation and your family is going to work for you and your situation and your family. It will not necessarily work for your neighbor. And I mean, I just appreciate you bringing different outlooks and different options for people. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and you know, just one kind of example is a lot of people swear by the budget, right? And they're like, you know, you have to create a budget, you have to set aside money for different categories, and you know, I'll be honest with you, like I did it for like a while, but it just didn't work for me, right? And I think that you just have to find something that works for you. Like just for me, I essentially do an expense tracker. And so I'm generally like pretty good as far as like understanding like how much we're actually like spending like each month. And so it's essentially like a different way where instead of creating a budget, I'm just tracking it throughout. And you know, we have ways to kind of dissect the different categories and you know, percentages and things like that. But it's like I don't necessarily have to create a budget each month. I just have an idea of previous months and how much we're spending towards different categories, and then I kind of, you know, continually like optimize it by saying, okay guys, I think we spent too much dining out this month, even though we definitely didn't dine out a lot in 2020. And you know, just figuring out like certain things, because I think that a common thing that people have trouble with is when they get like huge bills, as far as like, okay, we're going to go on travel and it's going to cost $2,000. Okay, like how does that fit into my budget, right? And so just the way that I do it is it's not setting aside necessarily like amount each month, because of course if we travel to Asia for like 3 weeks, it's going to be like a really, really expensive month, and we may even like lose money technically, right? But overall, you're able to see your monthly average savings rate and your yearly savings rate throughout. And so I try to look at like the big picture too.
I think now where we are now about 15 months into budgeting. And at this point in time, so we use an online app where we set the budget and then it auto syncs our transactions. So then we categorize them. Now I can just like forget about the app and have an idea in my head with where we're at. When we first started, I definitely could not do that. But I can see how you get more responsible with your money, you become more educated with what you're doing, how tracking would work if you know what you're doing and you're aware of it and you're not just impulse spending and doing all those crazy things, which is why we had to budget in the first place. But I could see how tracking could totally help someone in that situation.
And like you said, with like just being like goal oriented, like if you have the goal for your money in mind, whether it's like, okay, I'm, you know, getting that match or I'm doing whatever the Roth is, like once you have that idea of what you're doing with your money, I could see how it would get easier too, to just simply be an expense tracker and then have a conversation like, hey guys, last month, like this is where we, you know, we're a little bit off than what we normally are or whatever, like this should be another goal for us. I could see how that could definitely come in handy.
Yeah, and you know, one thing to kind of like add to that is like me and my wife, we actually discuss our like finances, but she's not necessarily the person that wants to look at every single kind of transaction. And so I'm typically the person behind the scenes saying, hey, I think we're like spending a little bit too much in like this category, or like, hey, you know, next month we have like these expenses kind of coming up. And so you know, like overall, right, like we kind of have combined finances, but then we have certain accounts that are like separate because that's just what works for us. But it also just is helpful that, you know, we've developed a kind of like understanding of, I'm going to be tracking like the finances because she's not necessarily interested in the, you know, like day-to-day like discussion, but I do kind of fill her in like, hey, by the way, so like, January, we're like looking at this, just so you're aware of the amount of money that we're like saving.
That's awesome. Seems like you guys have it dialed in.
Yeah.
So I.
It's expensive around here too,
I
so.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I always remember too. Is like the whole like DC DMV area. Like it's actually pretty pricey over there.
Oh yeah.
You hear stories and you're like, oh, like California's not the only difficult place in the nation to make things work.
Any big city area seems to be that way. Like New York City is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But other people that live in upper far away New York, they're like, this is really
They're
cheap.
chilling, yeah. Okay, so I have to ask, what's your guys' like item that you tend to splurge on, or like in the expense tracker? When are you like, honey, like this is a problem? Because I mean, anybody who listens to the podcast knows that like me and Mr. Bezos from Amazon, we need to have a talk because he's sneaking into my house a little too often. So I wonder if you're facing that.
Since we keep some finances separate, right? Like, so she has kind of her account. And so what we kind of decided is that anything that's joint for like the house or, for food and for groceries, like, we can use our like joint accounts, but anything from Mr. Bezos, she has her thing and I have my thing. Yes, we share the same Amazon Prime, but, I think as far as splurging, I think we're like reasonable. Obviously, like small things add up, but we definitely enjoy Amazon. I mean, it's super convenient. Even more so in like 2020. I actually wasn't even like a huge online shopper, like so to speak. I'm not big on like online shopping, but after 2020, I'm like $10 buy, $15 buy, and then before you know it, it's like in 2 days I have like 5 packages show up at my door.
You're like, I forgot what I ordered. That's what happens to me.
Exactly. I would say like overall the biggest line items are probably travel. Obviously we haven't really traveled much since we had Amelia and in 2020, but usually travel is the biggest line because we try to do at least one international trip a year. And so obviously like when you're out for 2.5 weeks, it could be upwards of like $2,000 to $3,000 per person. But this is just one of those things where we love traveling. Like we love exploring like new areas and like and seeing the different like national parks in the U.S. and things like that. And so we definitely value experiences. And we love travel, but we also understand that you have to have money for travel. And so we just we have goals of like of setting like at least like 50% savings rate every single month, so that way we know like we have enough buffer throughout the year, so if we do want to have that big trip, we'll be able to afford it.
You're making it a priority. If it's important to you, you're making it a priority. And I really appreciate you sharing this with us, because I think so many people think traveling and going on vacations and going somewhere for an extended period of time is just for the wealthy and it's impossible. But that's not necessarily the case. If you prioritize it and you set aside the money, and you don't have to lavishly travel every single time, every single year. So we get that.
Yeah, and when we travel, we're not staying in like 5-star luxury hotels, right? We're likely staying in Airbnbs, and we're focused on, we love like cheap eats, like we love like, I would say if there's one thing that we kind of focus on spending on is value. We just care about great value, whether it's a great value on a hotel or great value on food or, great value on a car. Like all the things that we try to focus on are about value. And so if it's worth the money, we'll spend it if we can afford it. But yeah, we're not staying in luxury like hotels and like eating at nice places all of the time, because we know we would not, that would not work in the expense tracker.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like, we haven't done traveling abroad other than our honeymoon. I'm actually just not really a great traveler. I'm Yeah.
Okay, no, you can't even say that. He's never been anywhere. The only place he's ever been was Mexico for our honeymoon. So you just don't have experience traveling.
I guess, yeah. It's just, I don't know. I'm a creature of comfort. And
No.
we'll see.
We've only been to like Nashville, Oregon, and Mexico together. I've been like to 17 countries, but never with him. Only Mexico. But you've just never traveled.
Well, yeah. What I've heard from people who travel is that, like, I mean, just like there, are things here on the street, like you can get really good, cheap food on the street just by walking down the road, and exploring those is so much better than some, yeah, like high dollar hotel and restaurant in the hotel, being actually able to like explore the culture and stuff. And like you said, that's where you find great value. That's the memories that are going to carry on.
So one of my favorite places in the U.S., for those who really know me, I love Las Vegas. We usually do a guys trip there every single year, and I've probably been there multiple times every year since I was 21. And so the one thing that is so underrated about Las Vegas is there's great food 24/7, and there's so much food that is cheap and affordable off the strip. Like there's great restaurants there, and so I highly like recommend it. If you're looking for like a melting pot of food, you can probably find any type of cuisine in Las Vegas.
That's cool. Let's go to Vegas.
Okay.
I love that idea.
Okay, I have to ask a question. It's not really even a question. I have to give you mad props and a shout out. So have seen on your page you have your daughter, your new dad. Is she 2020 baby? She's a total quarantine baby?
Yes, she's a 2020 baby. She was born in August.
Oh, total. There you go. Our daughter just turned 1. She was born in December of 2019. So she had like 3 months of life before the world crashed. But so we get that. So your daughter is like 5-6 months old or something?
Yes. Yeah, she is a little bit more than 5 months old.
Okay. You have already set up a 529, and you have money from like the proceeds of your ebook and everything going towards her 529. Can you tell us how you got started with that? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
I wanted to provide a resource where it was like just an easy to read guide, for other people who are looking for kind of like money and career and like life tips. And then, when I was thinking about like the actual proceeds, I was thinking, well, I'm doing fine. Like, I don't necessarily like, need these like proceeds. And so how can I, have these proceeds go to someone else? And I was thinking, well, hey, like Amelia is about to be born, and the people who are going to be likely purchasing this are probably going to be like my followers and like my audience.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how can I allow them, to be part of her journey? And so when I was thinking about, financial literacy, I'm like, one thing that everyone needs to know about is compound interest and the benefits of that. And I was like, how can I, combine all of this with Amelia and allowing my audience to kind of see her grow up? Because I think that that part is also awesome, is great too, in that a lot of people have saw her when she was in the womb, and when my wife was like pregnant, and then now they kind of saw her like slowly like growing up and everything. And hopefully if Instagram is still around in like 18 years when she goes to college, we'll be able to kind of see this 529 grow, right? And so I just want to kind of inspire her that like you can build wealth through investing, and you can invest at like any age. And like hopefully by showing this, like I like really highlight that interest, because I think there's about $1,000 in there, but I think over $150 was just from interest. That's just like free money that she's getting. And so it's just a great way to combine like my audience and along with like my daughter, and kind of meshing everything together.
That's so creative.
Yeah, I like that. And I think a lot of people would be even more drawn to the resource, to be like, oh yeah, like it's not like I'm just lining his pocket. Like I'm doing
Right.
something that's going to better the next generation, or I'm going to support somebody getting into higher education. Like it's really cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. I like
Thank
that
you.
a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it also kind of stemmed because a few people were thinking, how can I support your daughter? She's so cute, right? Like how can I do something? And I was like, I don't have anything. I was like, I don't know. And then just thinking about this, since I at the time when my wife was pregnant, I was trying to finish up the ebook because I knew as soon as Amelia was born, would probably have 3 months of just no sleep, and I wasn't going to be able to kind of keep up this Instagram. And so, since I was kind of working on that, and it was right around her like due date, I thought this would be a great idea.
That's awesome. Love it. That's rad. Okay, so you've listened to the podcast. So this is I like to call it our famous last question. And it's one that we ask everybody that comes on, and we've gotten a myriad of answers, and I'm excited to listen to yours. If you could put a stop sign on anybody's financial path, what would you stop them from doing? What's the biggest thing that you would stop them from deciding on?
I would stop them from thinking that, you know what, I have to think in this box, right? Like so many people, they only know what they know, and that's it, and they think this is the only path, right? Like I have to go to high school, I have to go to college, and then I have to get a job, and then I work that for 40 years, and then I retire, and I have to buy that brand new car, that big house, and this is what my life is going to be like. And I think that once you kind of open up that box and think about possibly stepping outside of that box, your mindset kind of shifts. And that's really when my mindset shifted, when I started, learning about Mr. Money Mustache and the whole FIRE movement, and just to kind of understand that, you know what, like I don't have to retire early, but it's a possibility if I want to make it happen. It's a possibility that like I, don't necessarily like, it's also like something where I didn't understand what the FIRE number was, right? Like I didn't know that like if I had, $1 million or like $2 million, like I could just like retire. I think that most people don't even know that a number like this exists, or like the 4% rule and like things like that, is that you don't have to necessarily follow all of these things, but so many people are just so closed up in this box that they only have one singular way of like thinking. And once you kind of just open up the box and understand that there are all of these different possibilities, I think that, right, we talk within the personal finance community, it's really all about options, right? You don't have to necessarily commit to one option, but when you have options, like everything changes, and just in the future for us, it sounds crazy, but it's like, I don't want to work until I'm 65. And so I'm like trying to possibly retire at 50. If I can't do that, maybe I'll like go part-time. Maybe my wife doesn't have to work, full-time. There's just so many different options that maybe we'll have if we continue on this wealth building journey.
None of our parents are retired yet. And they're in their 60s now. And I don't want that. And it's not shaming them for what they've done, but we see so many older people now working until they're 70, 65, 70, even older than that. And that it doesn't have to be that way if you figure things out when you're younger. So I really love that. That's such good advice.
Yeah. And, one thing I would add to that is I think that when it comes to that FIRE number, people just don't think about like how much money is enough. I know for my parents, we're essentially putting like my 20-year-old brother through college, and they have this perception of this is really, really expensive. I have to just continue working. And, granted, they also love their jobs. And so, I don't think that their jobs are a huge burden. But I also tell people that, you can't really go to the grave with all of your money. Like you also need to enjoy life. You need to kind of make sure that like, the one thing that you take advantage of is your time. You can't get your time back. And, so many people who just think I have to work until, I'm 65. That's not necessarily the case. If you just do the math on compound interest and figure out how much you have to invest and just tweak like a few of your like financial habits.
I was listening to a football coaches clinic this morning, and the final thing that he spoke on was he had a picture that is widely believed to be the last picture taken of Steve Jobs before he passed away. And he said, when Steve Jobs passed away, he was, worth I think he said like $7 billion or something. And he said he couldn't spend a single dollar to get an extra minute of life. And it's so important that, the numbers are out there, they're attainable, but it's what you do with that time that's so important. And you're right, you can't take it with you. So figuring out how to enjoy life as well is really, really important. Really important.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
So, Chris, where can people find you on Instagram? I know that you have links in your bio for like your ebook and all of that information. So, where can people locate you at?
Yeah, so look for me on Instagram. It's at the.everyday.millennial. I'm mainly just on Instagram. I'm looking to branch out into other platforms in the future, but I'm not the most tech savvy. And so learning new platforms like TikTok hasn't been the easiest thing. And so I'm going to be working on a few more projects. So just stay tuned, and hopefully they'll be out in like the next few months.
Awesome. I'm going to put your information in our show notes. So everyone listening, just go to the show notes and click on his little link, the Everyday Millennial, and it'll take you straight to Instagram so you can make sure you follow him because his stuff is legit.
Legit. Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you for sitting down with us today, man. We appreciate it. Like I said, I'm super hyped because we got to interview Ryan, our financial coach, and we got to email Robert and Mike from Friends on Fire. But it's just always nice to have another male voice on the podcast. It's good. So I appreciate you, man, and I know that Haley does as well. So thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Take care. Thanks for checking out our interview with Chris, you guys. Make sure you go over to Instagram and follow him at the Everyday Millennial. He is putting out a ton of really good content right now surrounding the craziness of the stock market and all this GameStop stuff going on. So you've got to go over to Instagram and make sure you follow him. Now, honey, since they've gotten to the end of the episode, do you want to share some of the cool news with them?
We're having a baby!
Woo!
Just kidding. That was already news everyone knew. Okay, so we are doing a giveaway for our 10,000 downloads. Whoop, whoop. We've already technically reached this because we have a YouTube channel. If you didn't know we had a YouTube channel, we have a YouTube channel. There's only like 12 people following us there. But if you want to join us there, we're at YouTube too.
And I think YouTube channel is kind of misguided because it's not videos of us. It's just the audio of the podcast.
Just a podcast. It is about as bland as we can make it. Maybe I'll spice it up in the future. Okay, so for our 10,000 downloads giveaway, we are going to be giving away some cash money. The giveaway will be going on through February 12th, so you're going to have the rest of this week and then all of next week to enter. In order to enter, you need to be following our Instagram account, and it is at the price of avocado toast. You need to leave us a review. Hopefully it's a kind one, but we want to know what you think of our podcast. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and send us a screenshot of it through our DMs on Instagram, or if you are not on Instagram and you still want to enter this, you can totally just send us an email. Just screenshot us your review before you submit it, and then you will be entered to win some money.
Yes, and I want to make clear, you guys, that your review, while we'd like it to be positive, doesn't even have to be positive. We've asked for feedback on this stuff. We need your guys' help because we obviously are biased. But if you give us feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, we'll accept it. We want to get better. So if your review is your honest feedback, then we appreciate it. And we will absolutely still enter you in the giveaway. That is the ethical thing to do, and we will do that.
What if they have already submitted a review like in the past?
Oh, yeah. If you guys have already submitted a review in the past, just head over to your review on whatever platform you put it on, screenshot that, and send it over to us. You don't need to, double up reviews or, create fake email accounts to get us more reviews. People only do that when they need to get different yoga pants purchased. So,
Oh my God.
alrighty, that's going to do it for this episode of The Price of Avocado Toast. As always, we're super thankful to be part of this community with you guys, and we're so thankful you stuck around to have this conversation with us. Happy budgeting.
You've got this, Toasties. Thank you for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. If you vibed with this episode, share it with a friend.
If you're interested in speaking more with the financial coach, hit up our coach Ryan at MeFinanciallyFree on Instagram.